Hello everybody, I'm Crystal, and I used to be your typical iPhone girl. Alright, I'll admit it. I didn't even want to try Android because I thought, what's the point? But then I got an Android phone and I never looked back. This is actually the first time I've even used an iPhone since I started making these reviews. So is the iPhone 6s Plus enough to win me back? So I think the best way to start is with Apple's new tagline for the iPhone 6s, and that is, the only thing that's changed is everything. And I'm not really sure what Apple's talking about here. I would say 90% of the things are exactly the same as they were in the original iPhone 6, but the last 10% includes some new additions that are actually really cool, so you'll have to decide if they're enough to upgrade. What I have here is the iPhone 6s Plus, and you won't notice any changes by just looking at it, but you can definitely feel a difference. The iPhone 6s is made of a rougher and tougher aluminum housing to prevent it from bending so easily, and there have been YouTubers who have put this to the test, and yeah, iPhone's bending seem to be a thing of the past. Your iPhone 6s is not going to bend. So because of this, the iPhone 6s Plus feels a little heavier than last year's at 20 grams more, and is also a little thicker, just by 0.2 millimeters. And the height and width is also a tad larger, only by 0.1 millimeters, and a lot of this is due to the 3D touch mechanism inside, which we'll get to later. The only way to actually tell that you have the new iPhone 6s by looking is to do some detective work and try to see if you can spot the small S. But probably the easiest way to tell is if you purchase the phone in this rose gold color. And a lot of people are making fun of this color option, saying that it's just straight up pink, and yeah, they're kind of right, but it's a mixture of this nice shiny gold color mixed with a hint of pink. It's not gaudy looking or anywhere close to how the iPhone 5C in pink looked. In some lighting conditions, the pink color is less apparent and looks more like silver. But I think it's a perfect balance between gold and pink. It's beautiful, and I'm personally just in love with this color. And as far as the rest of the design, everything remains the same as last year's iPhone 6. We have a 5.5-inch screen with some pretty large bezels above and below it. The size of the screen slowly curved to meet the metal border, which feels very good. It's perfect for iOS, which promotes lots of swiping to go to previous apps. The button placement is the same with the power button on the right. It's pretty high up, which makes it a little difficult to reach, but it does prevent from accidental presses, which is good. The volume buttons are on the left, and right above is your vibration and volume slider. They all feel very tactile and responsive. This also includes the home button below the screen, which leads me to the first new addition to the iPhone 6s. A greatly improved fingerprint scanner. No doubt, Apple is once again back on top when it comes to speed and reliability of fingerprint scanners on phones. The iPhone 6s's fingerprint sensor is insanely fast. Almost too fast, I think. It immediately reads your fingerprint even after the smallest tap. So if you want to click the home button to view notifications, you won't have any time. What I find myself doing is using my knuckle or my pinky, which isn't programmed to read my notifications. It's that fast. Inside the two new iPhone 6s's, we have a new Apple A9 processor along with 2 gigs of RAM instead of last year's 1. It comes in 3 different storage models of 16 gigs, 64 gigs, and 128 gigs. And I don't really mind seeing 16 gigs in cheaper phones like the Moto G because it makes sense, but in an expensive flagship phone like the iPhone, 16 gigs is a little ridiculous, especially with all this phone can do. They could easily make the base model 32 gigs, but it is a pretty smart marketing strategy. Sucks for the buyer though. The iPhone 6s Plus sports a beautiful 5.5-inch HD display. Colors are very vibrant and everything is very sharp. Apple is definitely up there with the best HD displays. It's not as beautiful, of course, as most Quad HD displays or AMOLED panels like on the Galaxy phones, but for an HD display, it's very impressive, and I would happily settle for an HD screen of this quality if it meant less power consumption. Out of the box, the iPhone 6s is running iOS 9. It's simple, it's beautiful, and it's one of the smoothest software experiences I've used, and a lot of this is due to the new Apple A9 chip, which is fast. And the overall usefulness of iOS 9 is greatly enhanced with probably the biggest new feature of the iPhone 6s, and that's 3D touch. So the display of the iPhone 6s is pressure sensitive, and throughout the phone are hidden menus that can only be accessed when pushing the screen with extra force. For example, by pressing down on apps, you can trigger a little menu along with a nice subtle vibration that feels like a little poke. There, you'll have some extra options to choose from depending on which app you pressed. It's just a way to save some time and works very well. I know a lot of people, including me, that thought this was pretty gimmicky. I thought it was kind of silly for Apple to go through all this work creating 3D touch hardware that in the end isn't any more helpful than a long press. but after using it for a while, I can confidently say it's not a gimmick and is extremely useful. It's just another way to access more information or settings while still keeping the UI looking simple and clean. Long presses are still there, and they do one thing, and 3D Touch is there, and it does another. In other areas, 3D Touch can be even more helpful, like in the Mail app, or let's use Instagram. You can do what Apple calls peek and pop. So by pushing down with force, you can take a peek, or expand the preview box to see a little more information. And if you decide you like what you see and want to see the full story while still pushing down, push a little harder and the preview box will pop and expand to see the full picture. The recent app screen was redesigned in iOS 9 and probably was so specifically for 3D Touch. While in an app and pressing down on the left side of the screen, you can navigate through your recent apps. Doing this can be kind of awkward sometimes, and it does seem a little harder than just double tapping the home button, but I guess depending on how you hold your phone, it could be easier. You can't really tell how well 3D Touch works by watching these videos. I mean, you don't have to push very hard at all to trigger a pressure touch, but it's hard enough where you won't accidentally trigger it. Apple did a great job of implementing this, so it's easy and reliable to use. Alright, now let's move on to the second biggest change Apple made on the new iPhone 6s, the camera. iPhones have always had great cameras, and in 2015, Android smartphones made probably the biggest leap in the camera